And welcome back everyone, Marco CG77 here, and today we'll be doing an overview of the Steam version of King of Fighters 14 on the PC. Of course, this game was released way back in 2016, in August 25th with the standard version, and when it was first released, the graphics were more than a little rough. Character models weren't quite up to snuff, and honestly, a lot of the actual graphics shading that was chosen and the lighting did not show this game or did not have this game reflect in the best of light. Originally, the game was supposed to be using Unreal Engine, and then SNK Playmore decided to go ahead and utilize their own internally developed engine. This was their first foray into 3D, and I think they definitely took a lot of the lessons learned and at least to listen to the fans, especially when it came into their next 3D game, Samurai Showdown. The game did, of course, come out into, of course, PlayStation, came out of the arcades as well, and of course now in the PC. The last release was actually the Ultimate Edition, which was released in January of 2021. This is part of the Shune saga and is 14th in line. And as I mentioned, the first game in the King of Fighters series that is in 3D, and also the first 3D game that SNK has really done on the current consoles. The last time they released some 3D games was, of course, on the Samurai Showdown 64 arcade system, which unfortunately the games did not age very well. A graphical patch, as I mentioned, was released for this game a bit later in January 2017 and also then again in April 5th, 2017. And of course, the graphical updates were helpful. And the game definitely looks better now. It's definitely very polished, especially if you're playing it on the PC and a decent machine at 4K with, of course, VSync on, so complete 60 frames per second, but still definitely not as polished as other fighters in the genre, especially using high-end 3D graphics. The later games did look much better. Samurai Showdown is the next game they released, also in 3D, but instead of using their own internal engine, they did decide to go with Unreal Engine for Samurai Showdown, and it definitely shows because it does look a lot better. And even King of Fighters 15 does use the Unreal Engine as well. And I did forget to mention that King of Fighters was also released in 3D on the PlayStation 2 games with the King of Fighters Maximum Impact series. I remember playing them, but honestly, I did not play them extensively. They have a much more smaller roster, and for me, it felt akin to like the Rio Bout Dominated Mind, which was released on PlayStation, kind of more of a side story than part of the main game. Of course, it does use 3D animation versus traditional hand-drawn sprites. The gameplay, of course, had to be changed, and they did have to, really fix and adjust a lot of the special effects with their new 3D internal engine that they use. There is a new max mode system that you have access to in order to use your EX special moves. Of course, in order to activate max mode, you do have to have a stock power gauge to be able to activate it. If you do use 3 bars of your power gauge, it does get you to release your Climax Desperation move. Basically, it is one of the largest and easiest way to kind of get a Hail Mary when it comes to damages. They did try to make the game a little bit easier and more accessible for entry level fighters to really attract more players to the game. And I'm honestly one of two minds. Part of me definitely likes the idea. However, I don't like how easy it is to actually launch a super by just basically tapping the uh, light punch button several times. On the fourth press, it then activates your special move dependent on how much you've got stocked. So, in a way, it's nice because then at least everybody can have some fun, but it does get a little bit annoying if somebody just keeps, tapping jab. But of course, more experienced players can at least get around that. And hitting CD buttons this time actually goes into a blowback mode where it actually does throw your opponent across the screen and becomes with a wall bounce, so you're able to follow that up if you're fast enough. There's a party battle for online multiplayer mode. You can even do some crowd options as well. As far as the character roster, it's pretty big in the series. A lot of the cast does return, with some new characters like Shune, who is the new protagonist and also part of the new hero team. Maiten Kun, who's also another member of the China team. He's basically the one that has the pillow. Tung Fu Ryu, who is of course, the teacher of Andy and Terry's father, is now on here as well, also on the China team. Gang Il is Kim Kapon's master. Luong is a femme fatale. Xanadu is a criminal that's now known as part of the villain crew. Sylvie Paula Paula is a leader of one of the new teams for the official invitation team. Kukuri is a mysterious kind of man that's got a bit hooded. There is Mian, who is part of the official invitation team, is a Szechuan opera dancer. Nelson is the leader of the new South America team, who's a boxing prodigy. And you also have Zarina, also a new member of the South American team. And you have Banderas Hattori, also the last member of the South American team who uses Brazilian ninja arts. King of Dinosaurs is also part of the Mexico team. He's basically Tizok from Garo Mark of the Wolves. Hein is a butler of Geese Howard. Nakaruru comes from the Samurai Showdown series. Mui Mui, who is from the Dragon Gal Pachinko series for SNK. Love Heart is also from the Pachinko game released by SNK. And Alice Nakata is for Garou Densetsu, again, a Pachinko game released by SNK. The new sub boss for the game is Antonov, who's also the person that is supposedly basically setting the groundwork for the tournament, but of course, the final boss is Verse. Rock Howard also does make his return here to the King of actually no his debut here to the King of Fighters series as a downloadable character. Naj is also another character who is one of the new DLC characters. A lot of the teams do have some edits as well. So, for example, the Japan team stays pretty standard with Kyo Kusanagi, Benimaru Nikaido, and Goro Diamond. The Yagami team is Yori, Mature, and Vice. The Fatal Fury team is still Terry, Andy, and Joe. The Art of Fighting team returns with Ryo Sakazaki, Robert Garcia, and Yuri Sakazaki. The Kim team, or Korean team, is Kim Kapuan, Gang Il, and Luong. The villains team is Xanadu, Chang Kohan, and Joy Bunji. The official invitation team is Sylvie Paula Paula, Kukri, and Mian. The South American team is Nelson, Zarina, and Banderas Hattori. Mexico team is Ramon, Angel, and King of Dinosaurs, also known as Tizok from Guru Mark of the Wolves. The Southtown team is Geese Howard, Billy Kane, and Hein. And the China team is also known as the new hero team, is Shune, Miten Kun, and Tong Furyu. The Psycho Soldier team is Atene Asamiya, Sei Kensu, and Shingen Sai. The Kari Warriors team is Leona Hydern, Ralph Jones, and Clark Still. The Another World team is Nakaruru, Mui Mui, and Love Heart. K-Dash team is K-Dash, Kula Diamond, and Maxima. The women's fighting team is King, Mai Shiranui, and Alice Nakata. And even with that large roster, SNK even added even more in the form of DLC. They also added Whip, Ryuji Yamazaki, Vanessa, Brock Howard, Oswald, Hydern, Naj, and Blue Mary. And as far as the stages, you've got Neo Osaka in Osaka, Japan, overlooking Osaka Station. Next up, you've got the industrial area for the Yagami team. Then you've got Navajo Land in USA, which is part of the Fatal Fury and also Blue Mary's background. You've got the Maple Gardens for the Art of Fighting team, Hotel Marine Paradise for the Korean or the Kim team. The Underground Prison is for the Villains team. Masquerade is for the official Invitation team. Iguazu Falls in Brazil is for the South American team. And you've got the Guanajuato Dynamite Ring in Mexico, which is part of the Mexican team, and for the download character Vanessa. Geese Tower in Southtown is for the Southtown team. The Great Wall of China, of course, is for the China team. And the Bundi Shanghai China is for the Psycho Soldier team. Hydern Fleet in the Mediterranean Sea is for Ikari Warriors, Whip, and also Hydern. The Dream World team is for the Another World team. And you've got the Derelict Church, which is K Dash's team. The Old Castle for Woodman Fighters team. The Bossa stage is Antonov Super Arena in Russia. The Destroyed Arena stage is for Verse. And of course, you've got the training stage as well. And that rounded out the stages that came with the game. They also actually had downloadable stages like the Transcontinental Railroad, which was tied with Rock, the City Circuit of Monaco, which tied with Yamazaki, and you've got the Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, which tied in with Najd. And with that, that pretty much ends the data portion of this overview. Going into the game itself, I think honestly, the game, after being polished and after the many years since its release, with rollback netcode, polishes to the graphics, and everything else, the game I think is a very solid 7.5, maybe 7.9 out of 10. Um, and honestly, for me, the reason why is because of the graphics. It's not as quite as polished as it needs to be compared to other 3D fighters using, of course, modern machines, whether that be a high-end PC or at least on minimum a PlayStation 4. Um, that said, I think for the gameplay that it does have, the replayability and the fun factor, that's what keeps the number up there. I did enjoy this game briefly. It was definitely much more enjoyable once they added even more characters, especially a lot of the characters that fans really missed and wanted. Again, as I mentioned, the gameplay itself didn't really miss a beat. Still as tight as ever, 60 frames per second, no real problems there. I am still of two minds when it comes to the kind of the ease factor of having that auto combo, especially flowing into a super special or a max special. I'm still of two minds about that. Personally, I wish they didn't add it in, but I could see why they did. As far as the graphics themselves, as far as the stages, I actually didn't mind. The stages are very well done, they're nicely polished, especially when you're watching them in 4K, 60 frames per second. The actual animation of the characters, I think, are still well done, and so are the special effects. I think they're very solid 8. It really is just the graphical style for the internal engine that they were using. But of course, if you were comparing the game now, fully updated, versus the vanilla release way back in 2016, definitely a huge market difference. Um, though King of Fighters 15, at least from the about hour or two that I've played so far, definitely goes above this, and I think it shows that while maybe at that time initially it was a good idea for them to go with an internal engine, I think really showing and seeing that since they went to Unreal Engine, and I think which is what they did for Samurai Showdown, kind of the refresh reboot, and for King of Fighters 15, that was definitely the much better choice. Especially in Samurai Showdown's case, since it was also on Steam, it was on Epic Game Store, PlayStation 4, compatible with the PlayStation 5. In fact, it even still ran on the Switch. Since King of Fighters 15 also is on Unreal Engine, same as Samurai Showdown 4, I am honestly hoping for a version of King of Fighters 15 to come out physically on the Nintendo Switch as well. As far as playing this game, of course, you could play it on Steam. Definitely running a lot of sales now, especially with King of Fighters 15 coming out. You can also pick it up on Good Old Games, of course, on the PlayStation Store. And that's pretty much the main pieces. If you're going to pick it up physically, PS4 was pretty much the only way, or if you were picking up the Ultimate Edition, which was released in 2021 from either Limited Run Games or from Pixel Love. So that time has now passed. Overall, I still think this is a decent entry into the series. It was definitely a gamble by SNK Playmore, as they knew that they had to step into the 3D realm, and even the developers was really, glad to have moved on from going from 2D sprites, which at the time, when of course when they were creating King of Fighters 94 all the way up to 2003, that's really what they had and what they knew. And so with them kind of moving forward, trying to get the best graphics that they could, I'm glad they had this as their try. But even happier that they decided to go with Unreal Engine for their future efforts. If King of Fighters 15 is anything to go by, it looks like the future will be bright graphics wise for the next series and games. I'm still hoping that SNK will maybe license or take a few more cues from Arc Systems and maybe do one of their games in the style of Guilty Gear Strive. Maybe World Heroes, because I think that game lends itself very well to a very anime-esque type of game. I know for King of Fighters 14, from a lot of the research that I've done, that originally they did decide to go with a more realistic look. After taking a look at doing more anime styled versions in 3D, like what they did with their hand drawn sprites in King of Fighters 12 and 13, and they definitely went away from that because I don't think they just were very confident with their internal 3D engine. At least that's what I'm guessing. So I am glad that they did, again, that they had this. I still bought it. I love my Ultimate version. I still have it on physically on PS4, and of course the nice thing about the Ultimate version, it did come with a 2 disc soundtrack. Actually, sorry, 4 disc soundtrack, which was pretty sweet to have on CD. Even though I pretty much just ripped it and now I just have it on MP3 format. Now for an overall rating, graphics, I think now a solid 7.5. Gameplay and replayability, still a very solid 9. Music, sound effects, voice, honestly I'm thinking more like an 8. There's definitely some decent tracks, not exactly, you know, bangers, but there's enough decent tracks that it's a good mix. Definitely not as bad as some of their other games, but definitely not as good. And I actually kind of like King of Fighters 15 soundtrack a bit more. As far as replayability, again, still a solid 8. So overall, for me, this game hovers right between like a 7.9 to an 8.2, and I think that pretty much fits some of the reception or the overall average reviews of the game, which I believe hovers at around 79%. As far as if this game is worth a pickup, honestly, with all the sales, I've seen it as low as $5.99 or $9.99 on either Steam or Good Old Games, and of course, Sony PlayStation runs pretty much a lot of their sales very often. So if you pick it up for under $10, I think personally it's definitely worth it. So definitely a no-brainer there. Now, if you only had to buy one current King of Fighters 3D game, would you buy 14 versus 15? I think honestly, as far as it stands right now, I think 15 is the better game and would go with that. So, but that said, I do appreciate you watching and liking this overview.